This is Codified Wisdom. Sharp insights, no fluff, and real-world wisdom from leaders who want to get you further, faster. Now, here's your host, Eric Eager.
All right. Hey, welcome back to Codified Wisdom, where we're going to go behind the scenes with leaders who are redefining what it means to lead, build, and scale with purpose. Today's guest is Dixie McCurley, and she's a partner with Cherry Bekaert, and she leads the growth team for their CAS practice. They call it FAO, and has been a pioneer in transforming how firms serve clients, technology, strategy, and inclusion. And she's really, I'm so excited to have her on here because she's known for digitally transforming just the whole profession. So, but her commitment to human, kind of human-centered teams, bridging the gap between finance, operations, and innovation. And today's episode, we're going to walk through her personal journey because it's really interesting, and how she's founding kind of this new tech forward vision for the firm and leading digital change, throughout the country. And she's probably one of the most forward-looking individuals in this space. So I'm so glad to have her on here. So Dixie, welcome to the show. Thank you for being on here.
Thanks so much for having me, Eric. I'm excited
for
our conversation today.
Yeah. So like what we do every week, when we do these, I always want to know, what I think everybody that's listening, it wasn't like, I'm sure when you were, out there as a little girl going to college that you had this, hey, I'm going to end up here. And so what I'd like to talk to you a little bit more, let's talk about your journey, kind of what was your early influences, the education, the mentors, that kind of, how did you end up the path to where you're at today? And tell me a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, I actually been reflecting back a lot on what were those things when I was little that made that impression on me and influenced me and really has gotten me here today. I love to think about that. A lot of times I go back to my dad, and he was a pilot in Vietnam, and his left brain approach to processes and systems and math and science, I think, was one of my biggest influences ever. And so all through elementary school, middle school, high school, and college, one thing I always went back to was math. And so I absolutely have always been great with numbers. I don't know what it is, but I have accepted that I have the gift for numbers and math.
Yeah.
And I love it. There were so many years, growing up trying to understand what I wanted to do for a career, that those influences that I thought, okay, well, I don't want to be a math teacher, even though it's sort of like my dream job. I've always come back to math, and I think that really propelled me into computer science. And when I went to Auburn, I immediately started computer science, but I have always been a nerd. I was president of the computer club in high school, and had some scholarships for computer science, but I ended up in accounting because I love business. And so when I was in college, I had to put myself through school. I was one of the early sellers on eBay. So I've always had that left brain, right brain thing. So I sold architectural salvage and put myself through college on eBay using web TV. So math, technology, business with a little bit of creative flair really are all of those influences, I think, that's led me to where I am today in my career.
Wow. And it seems like it's just like this perfect storm of where we're at today, just numbers and business and technology. And you always seem like, it seemed like you were very forward thinking. And, tell me a little bit about, you co-founded an accounting firm. And it seems like it was all this combination of all those, and you were really rethinking, and you were the kind of forward thinking way of setting up an accounting practice. You were next gen before it was cool to be next gen. So tell me a little bit about like how your journey, how'd that start? And tell me a little bit like you had the good times, Tell me some of the lessons learned when you were building that firm.
Yeah, so to get to that firm, I have to start with Earthlink. I started there in payroll out of Auburn, out of college with an accounting degree. And what I learned there at an enterprise level company, I said yes to any special project that we had. So when we acquired 38 rural internet service providers, I said yes to helping integrate those. When we moved the world headquarters from California to Atlanta, I said yes to help with everything. And so I learned a lot there, but they put us through Lean Six Sigma training on the month-end close. And I learned how a huge enterprise level corporate company that reports to the SEC, how they can move from a 20-day close to a 2-day close. So we were part of all of those process reengineering. I ended up leading the reporting function there at Earthlink after we had implemented an accounting and a finance system. I was the lead for the 55 people on how to structure all of that. So having that math, computer science, brain, knowing how to map processes, draw and design systems, that made me see that it wasn't the shareholders where my passion lied in a public company. It really was the business owner. I was like, oh, businesses need to know this. It's why I went into accounting so that I could always run a great business. So I went and worked at a top 15 accounting firm in Atlanta, and they did business advisory. So all of those clients that had grown into mid-market, they were having all these problems from growing from a small size business to a mid-sized business. And so they put me immediately within the first year on about 75 different clients to go in,
Wow.
like fly in, hire a controller, do new systems, do new processes, all of that. But I saw a real gap there that it was hard for clients to, accept all of that change, and they needed a more managed services approach. And so because we were very tied to the tax side of things, we needed stuff for compliance. I wasn't able to really let that fly on the managed support side. So that's why I decided to start my own firm and cater to the clients that need help modernizing their accounting and finance departments. And so that was a 10-year stint that I learned a ton of lessons as an entrepreneur, a ton of lessons about high growth in sort of like a new field that didn't fit traditionally in an accounting firm. Also what it means, to have that every 2 weeks making payroll, everybody's family relies on you. That kind of pressure really were some of the things that I learned there. And I learned how to wear a lot of hats. So you've got to learn about HR things and employee handbooks, and you've got to learn about marketing and sales strategies. And so I think the biggest good thing that I learned there was how to close a deal. So how to go shake the trees, do the sales, and really resonate with the clients. And so I learned how to talk to clients. And then the biggest thing I learned how to do is listen to what the clients needed. And I may think they need one thing, but I get buy-in when I echo to them what I heard them say that they need, and really align and create a team approach. That's what I learned there. But I also learned a little bit about business structure and legal things, and how to grow, adding capital in or growing organically. Those types of things was really a lot of the lessons that I learned there.
Man, and and I like how that's a couple of things. One, they don't teach you that in business school. That, oh, by the way, they show you all this great things when you're the owner of the firm or the founding and managing partner. All these at the end of the journey benefits, they forget to tell you about you're the last to get paid. If there's anything left, then you get paid. But everybody else's families and all those other responsibilities, they fall on your shoulders. And how much of this were you able? I mean, you had to figure this out on your own. Was it, did you just consume and read a lot of books, or how did you learn about this? Or did you, just tell us the process there? Because I'm surely it was kind of like these things fell in your lap and you're like, well, I can't delegate this to anybody. I got to figure it out. Tell me a little bit more about how you learned that way.
Yeah, well, I think I'm a lifelong learner, but also what's even more important is I always understood team sports and the power of a coach and the power of a mentor. And so I surround myself with others who know a lot more than I do. And I ask them questions and I ask what they think and I listen to advice. So I think it's that team sports mentality that really helped me understand how to grow and put me where I'm strong, but also create a team that's stronger than me in a lot of other ways, right? So to me, it's all about the team and a well-rounded team. I love it to pass the ball to other people. In high school, I was a point guard, but I also had the number one assist because it takes someone else who may be observing something, not bouncing the ball, to be able to really score. And so I try to not keep my head down. I try to keep my head up in the market, in our profession. I attended a lot of conferences and I really got plugged into the profession in those 10 years to listen to where it was headed, what resources and support we have with that. So I'm very grateful to have really gotten early on the power of our profession, the AICPA and CPA.com, and what all they do to enable and support us too. And I took their playbook and ran with it and implemented it and made sure that the teams understood it, made sure that the team still took training and knew the why behind all of it. I credit Simon Sinek reading the book. I got a signed copy. I think it might have been in 2013 or 14 at the Digital CPA conference. And I read that thing cover to cover and redid the entire business about our why we existed. And we wanted to help clients really achieve their dreams and make sure that the numbers told the story of the business. And so, lifelong learning, training, coaching, guiding, and knowing that I don't have all the answers.
Well, that's every great leader, I think, eventually gets to that. You know what? I don't have all the answers, but I know that I can go ask for help, which is always a great demonstrating limit and the why. But let's touch a little bit, because I love what you're talking about. Helping these business owners, and you said like advisory. In the profession, we can be seen as accounting can be seen as just, we'll produce the numbers. Here you go. Here are the numbers. But let's talk about how you're starting to see where advisory is more than service. It's about outcomes of helping to navigate, not be historians. And tell us a little bit about now you're kind of this version of this transition in the accounting profession of moving out of this transactional mindset to now really have an ability to have an impact on the outcomes of these business owners. Tell us a little bit about your vision and where you see the profession going.
At another one of the digital advisory conferences, Daniel Burris was there, and he's a futurist. And he made a very compelling closing keynote that really had a huge impact on me. And he said, look at your top two products and services. And technology is so disruptive that they're going to be obsolete in 5 to 10 years. And I really stood back and thought about it. I was like, okay, for our whole profession, what happens if we were to produce a push button tax return? Well, if we're doing outsourcing properly, and it fed into a technology company, right? It might be that it's a push button. It might become free. And he used the example of Google Maps, and he said, how many of you had a map in your car when you got here today, a paper map, versus use your phone? And so he made a lot of really great analogies. And so that transformation of technology is real. And I've learned along the way to listen to clients that they don't really care about a standard P&L flux analysis, which has always been our product we've given them. He made me realize that they will throw it in the trash, right? It'll just go away. And so I think that way we used to do things with the 3 financial statements and having a let's review the P&L and let's talk about the balance sheet reconciliation. That product and service, I mean, it's dead. The clients do not want to hear that. They want to know, how was it compared to all sorts of other things. So you can't just give them anymore. Here are your monthly sales totals. They want to know which customers, how much they've bought before. They want to know the customer compared to everything else, and the same thing on their spend. And so, thinking about cash is king with the client, they are worried about the same thing that I was worried about as an entrepreneur, was sometimes, how am I going to make payroll in 2 weeks? What do I need to do today on accounts receivable and collections and invoices to make sure that I make payroll? And all of those interconnected parts, they do have something to do with a third financial statement that almost no one uses, on the cash flow statement. Do I need
Yeah.
to fund this organically? Do I need to bring in investors, or do I need to go get a loan? You've got to plan for that stuff up front. So those types of outcomes, if we could speak in different languages, plain language, to the way that businesses are healthy, that's the approach that I take, is how can I help them know if their business is healthy? Number one, with cash. Number two, with growth. Number three, with operations, et cetera. They want to talk about their business more than they want to hear me to talk about their business. And so I did some study years ago with, how can I have a compelling message, and how can we really get our clients to open up? And it's just true. They want help from an advisor. They want to witness our thoughts on their data. So if we can get quick access to the data and tell them what we're thinking, where it doesn't have to be accurate, it just has to be a thoughtful conversation. That's how we build that relationship, because they want to learn from us what we see on how they can run a better business. So those are my three things that I think clients want, and that has led my advisory approach now for many years, is tell us what's important to you and let us construct the numbers to tell the story of the business, of what's happened and where you're headed.
Wow. I mean, that is so impactful, and it's got to help that you sat in their seat, in their shoes. You've walked in their shoes to know those struggles, to know that, hey, is there something out there that I don't know about that I should know about? And then, and let me ask you that, like, of all the clients you work with, you mean, how many literally have real good financial literacy? Do you find all the data we've shown says that this is something that most entrepreneurs really need help with? And it's not just financials, but obviously a number of other areas. Tell me about your experiences of, of the positive impact that you have with them. Understanding, one of the things I want to touch on, not everybody, every owner is desiring the same outcome. Some want a legacy, they want to hand it over to their kids. Some of them want to create jobs in the community, have a bigger purpose. Some of them do want to get to an exit and pay it. But you're asking those questions about where is your desires, your needs, and then talk about how many actually know, like, how they can get there.
Yeah, I mean, related to the first part of that, how many have good financial literacy? I might be wrong on my swag of an answer. Okay, because I come from the days of a public company, a billion-dollar organization with 5 million customers. That was my first 6 years of my entire career. And then since then, I've seen hundreds of small businesses. And so in that $200 million to $250 million space, I mean, those are some of my favorite clients, are going from 50 million to 200. You've got to really have your act together and have financial literacy. But it's really tough for the clients that have grown from 5 million to 25 million. I think 25 million is that sweet spot for outsourcing, where they must have it. They must rely on someone else for their financial literacy. So I think that, while I'm going to give you a number of a percentage because you asked,
Yeah.
I also am going to continue to caveat it that I think it's about 20% financial literacy, the way that an expert of accounting and finance would score it.
Yeah.
Um, It might be 35% because I've done so many client assessments where we do a health score diagnostic, and on average, our team usually comes back with about a 30 to 35% score on their accounting processes and systems, et cetera, related to financial literacy. But oftentimes we have to soften it to go, you know what, but they're doing a great job over here. So I would say like 60% would be what would be more fair than that this is all we do all day, every day.
Yeah.
And so related to that, it's not as much about where they are, which is their current issue and their current score. To me, it's all about where they want to go and the why behind it. If they want to transfer the business to the next generation, usually they are very paper-based, manual process-based, but they can run it in their sleep. So those wise, usually elders, they can run that business. They've done all the bookkeeping from scratch. They've built it, grown it. They've handled good scale. They've learned how to do it. But that transfer to the next one, you've got to usually, that's where that digital transformation, most of our clients are plugging in there to say, okay, I've got to turn over the business now, and we need to do it in ways that is not all in my head. So, what they want to be in the future, what it needs to look like, we can help in so many ways. We can actually help with wealth management, right? I've got a whole team that knows how to do that, the structure of that, the compliance of that, the timing of it, the strategic plan, all of those things. But to me, it comes down to the nuts and bolts. We've got to have that source transactions tell the story on that, because they don't want to do it anymore. The newer generation's learning so much that the one thing that they would outsource, or the second thing, the first thing is always payroll, right? Everybody's fine outsourcing all the payroll and the 401k. Maybe 5% of businesses are still doing that stuff themselves these days. But the second one is now accounting. They all want to outsource the accounting and finance function, because it's a hard thing to know all of that stuff now when they're learning how technology is disrupting their businesses too. So they're getting disrupted with technology. They got to learn the operations, the sales, the IT side of all of that. And accounting and finance, we've really done a great job in our profession the last 15 years, being that place where they can come to, where they don't have to build a team internally. They can come to us. We can do it, and then have better numbers to have better conversations.
Well, I like where let's dive in that a little bit more, because the next exponential, we're in, some people, they're fearful of AI. They don't like change. They don't like these things. But on the opposite end of it, as a business owner, this can be one of the most exciting times to ever be an entrepreneur, because things that we couldn't naturally, kind of gig economy for exponential growth, like accounting. I mean, think about it. From 20, 30 years ago, we had, QuickBooks Desktop, great product. I mean, or even you could go back to the DAC Easy in those days. But you had to do accounting internally because you couldn't get remote access. You couldn't do all these things. Now, fast forward to today, you can now outsource that accounting function. Because I tell you, even I'm I'm still a CPA, still got my license, and having to manage an accounting team internally, especially from a CEO, put in the situation of a CEO who is not a CPA, is not they're a great entrepreneur, come out with a great product, they got a great service, they're blowing and going. And to have to manage that function of making sure that the accounts are reconciled, make sure that we have proper GL account structure. And oh, by the way, then it make me pay attention to the income statement. And most of the time I've seen is that most business owners, without good advice and the traditional, they'll just look at the income statement and go, are we making money? And do we have cash in the bank? And that's the extent of their financial analysis. Talk about now the ability for a firm, now with technology and disrupting it, I can now hand it over to an expert team of people who do this all day long, do it way more affordably than I would have done 10, 15 years ago. And what does a modern firm look like today? And what's it look like in the new environment? Because at least what I've been told is that the kids coming out of school today, the next generation of entrepreneurs, they are not bound by the same mindset that you and me growing up. They have this exponential mindset that I can create $1 billion company in 2 years. And they just don't think the same way that we do because they're not bound by the same restrictions that we do. Talk a little bit about the modern firm and where you see it fitting in to literally change the odds and help all these next gen businesses.
You said a lot on all of that, and related to a modern firm. I just watched the other day a documentary, and I love to use analogies, and it said the name of it was Cities of the Future. And they had the STEM program with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders designing cities of the future.
Wow.
What they had was they had no restrictions. Like, they thought all kinds of things were possible. So that's definitely the mindset that I have right now, that I want to help influence the people who come out with all the dreams from, the right side of the brain on the art of the possible. I think that we've got to capture that in firms, to make sure that this creativity, that we don't miss out on it, and that we're the late majority of that. So I look at all of it in terms of the exciting times. A couple of things. Jeffrey Moore, who wrote Crossing the Chasm, I think that really applied to when CAS came about back in 2010-ish, where it got really popular with everyone. I think that we're at a point of inflection now with all of that too. And I think it is AI. That is one thing that my pilot father taught me, really, was that fearlessness, right? I'm not afraid of AI. I am an early adopter and innovator, and I am doing everything I can to learn about how to apply it. And I'm starting to see some real, light at the end of the tunnel on that part. So in terms of the QuickBooks Desktop, that's the part about the experienced people, like myself, of having 20 years of experience to remember when the server was in the closet of our clients' offices that had their last 15 years of their company's general ledger data, that when the office got broken into and those got stolen, it was gone forever. It was the server that backed up all the files. So I was one of those people that had to parachute in to rebuild it all. And so I have done that a number of times in my career, where the in-house team didn't know how to do it, but all the things that I learned at Earthlink and learned with all of my, technology passion of how to recreate things, that type of experience was really key to be able to take advantage of right now, like what's going on with AI. I think about it like the .com boom also. We thought that cloud was going to replace all of our accountants. And what it did is it made us have access like we had never had before. I still think the same thing about AI right now. It's helping me do the 10 things that I didn't get to in the day a couple of years ago. I can actually get to those 10 things. When my energy is low, it brings it back up to really inspire me to do great things and go up to the 50,000-foot view and look at and see the forest for the trees while I dive into the trees. And so my passion has been reignited for where we're headed with a modernized accounting and finance department today. I think that clients are going to have the same tendency to want to try to learn it themselves, but they're going to see very quickly that they don't want to monitor 25 things anymore. They want us to monitor it. And I think that the college students that are coming out, they don't see it the same way that we used to see it. They actually, I think, want to dig in and see that once the books are closed, that's actually when our work starts. And they're like, month end close, what is that? Everything's done for you. Well, why don't we think about that they come in and say, well, all the transactions are recorded by AI, even though that's their perspective. And a lot of us still laugh and say, well, no, it's not there yet. I think it will be there quickly. And I think that we've got to start building the things that'll allow us to not be disrupted to the client conversations, that we're not offering a free month-end close. That part is going to be when we start our new role in a modern accounting finance. We're going to have all the systems connected. We're going to have all the transactions rolling and coded and watched and managed by exception and all those things we've been wanting to do for 15 years in our profession. I think that we're there. So I think a modern firm is the one that's going to be, now more than ever, that managed service provider of all things business. Whatever they need, whenever they need it, we really are offering it from a modern finance and accounting standpoint and function. And we now can do it on the level of the office of the CFO, not on a bookkeeping level. So we don't have to be constrained anymore with just the handling the transactions. We can actually do that outsourced CFO services, managed services for a lot of different businesses. And that's the big thing that AI is going to help us do, is have that whole landscape across all of the clients. Let us share with them what we're seeing when we're seeing it. It's going to be a big shift that the modern firm needs to see, not just one by one client, but let's do those many clients all at once.
Wow. So, there's always this conversation about like where you want to be and where I'm at now. How big a jump? So if somebody's listening to this and I want to be I want to jump in. Like, hey, I'm a forward thinker. I want to. How big a jump is this for me? How hard is it for, um, how hard is it for me to become a modern firm? Is it a big jump, or how close, are you be able to provide that today, right now?
I think it's a reality. A couple of our big wins in the last year have been with $17 million companies that are growing into the $50 million space quickly. I laughed the other day because we had a startup company a few years ago that came in, and they were like in that $1.2 million space and one of our clients. And I looked back the other day because I don't get into the day-to-day all the time with the clients, and I come back in and look at a quarterly view or an annual view, but this one had gotten away from me because it was so small when it came in, but they were already at 17 million. So that fast growth, we've helped them handle it. And then we're ready to add more services. Now they need to get audit ready, when they were just a startup business just a few years ago. So I think we are absolutely there. I think it's the different types of niches in terms of which industries are best that we can do. I think we're still working on building out a few more industries where it is seamless. We do have the metrics to help them. We do have the industry expertise, but we're really bringing it together across the firm, where audit partners who are industry leaders and thought leaders in industries, I think that we're at a point of inflection where they're going to be able to have some influence with our top outsourcing clients to be able to guide them. Because if the month end close is already done, when we start to do the advisory work, well, we can bring in a team to have sort of like a mini war room on their business in 15 minutes and use AI to do it. We can give them out a great product of the health of their business, and where we see that they can take steps to bridge the gap of building that modernized business, to be able to take advantage of everything they need. And I think that firms right now are poised for us. I think we'll see that grow in the next 2 to 5 years, where it's just an absolute reality, not just in the forefront.
Man, so let's talk a little bit about now, kind of old school, new school. The old school, not having, like it, being a CEO of a small company a lot of times, and when you have startups and you start growing, man, you want the help, you need the help, but I just couldn't afford the help, and I can't blame the firms before because they had deep expertise in a number of areas, but they were kind of constrained by time. You got an expert, their time's valuable. But now, with the addition of technology and AI and its capabilities, talk about now, hey, I'm a small growing business and I desperately need the help. But now your ability to provide the level of service, talk about how you can now really impact businesses at a rate where even where I'm just, kind of getting out of that first phase one, phase two growth. Talk about how now you can come alongside that journey and provide the help I need at the time where I can afford it and grow right alongside. And tell me a little about how exciting that is and what kind of impact you can have now.
Yeah, I am very excited about it. Um, Having spent 20 years of my career figuring out how to make it hum and realizing that a machine in the factory, those two views of can I make the machine hum and then can I make the factory hum? That's where I see us really today of that old school and new school is not only are we looking at the factory, but maybe looking at its impact on the environment. So that's the new school view is, go all the way up to the factory's impact on the environment and all the way down to the factory and the inner working cogs. I think that to me is that the new school modern firm mindset is that we can go all the way up and all the way down. And I meet with clients all the time that say, wow, you really know your stuff on the details. Yeah. And in accounting and finance, you really have to. You have to go up to that 50,000-foot view, but sometimes you're in the weeds to figure out what went wrong with your chart of accounts. The reason why to do that is because we've got 100 other clients that are relying on our expertise of how to design a chart of accounts. And so I think for small businesses, out of 100 that I see, I would say maybe 5 have a great chart of accounts. So
Wow.
continue to scale that. Our AI capabilities on that for us to build our knowledge centers. I am looking at, okay, how can I get the things out of my brain of my experience and the wise lessons I've learned along the way? How can I teach the next generation? How can I teach our team so that we can help teach our clients? That's the stuff that I'm looking at that's going to have a great impact in productizing our services of a chart of accounts redesign. Clients don't only want a brand new chart of accounts that we say to do. They want to understand why. So I'm now thinking about how can I create a little webinar that we offer our clients on the front end about why we've designed it this way. I think once they understand the why, they don't care how we design it. And I think that they'll even care more about why it appeals to a lot of different clients and how best practices, that knowledge that we've got at our firms is so important. So I think that that's the biggest impact that we will have on each client is that one-to-many clients view. That's why, one in-house person, they don't get to see 10 other great examples of things that are working or not working. And so staying up on all of that in a quick way, we've got to align with them on here's your recurring activities that replaces, the function that you don't even have today in your business. And then we can do special projects along the way when they want more. And so that to me is how we can impact them of having a standardized version that they can rely on. When I meet with clients, I tell them I take my, accounting hat off and I put on my business hat with you. And if I were your CFO, if you were to hire me internally, what would I want you to spend on your accounting and finance function? And having worked with hundreds of clients and maybe even 1,000 at this point, I see that from a CFO perspective, let's say they're spending 10% on their accounting and finance of their annual revenue. Well, that might be too much. What if they're spending 4%, but they've got just the transactions coded? That might be too much also. So some businesses I see spend 0.25% of their revenue on their accounting function, and those are always the ones that are the messiest. They can't do anything in the future, no planning at all. And so I tell clients immediately once I do that analysis up front, you are underfunding your accounting and finance function. And if they want to stay there, they're not a good fit for us. And so for me, I think that how we align to them is that we show them that if we're at 2% of their annual revenues on our costs, that is totally fine. But if we're at 4%, they should be expecting a much more advisory role from us. And we're actually helping them drive growth in their business and drive performance of their business and watching out for the health of their cash and the health of their business. And so that usually shakes them loose from what they've always done in the past and how they've thought about, by the hour paying their accountants. And instead, we create a managed services feel to show them we're invested with them, that as they grow, our services are going to grow, because that's what we see with all businesses growing from 5 to 25 to 75 million. You've got to grow your accounting and finance function. You're going to need different things along the way there. And we've got now statements of work that help with all of that. So they're not surprised. And we're really leading that strategic account management with them instead of sending them a bill that they don't know what they're paying for.
Wow. So let's unpack a couple of things. And then, that's a really good point, mind shift of, first of all, everything stops and starts with if you've got bad data, you're jeopardizing your business. If you don't have a couple of things here also, no reason for them to learn lessons the hard way. Now you can tap into this, you hit on a real good point there, is that if you hire one controller, one accountant, then their experiences are limited to that person. Well, 3 heads are better than one, but how about 1,000 heads? No reason to learn those lessons the hard way. Tap into that experience so you can get further faster. Second thing I want to point out is this shift in this mindset of, accounting seems like this overhead burden. I don't need to, it's never seen, or the mind shift is that it's strategic. Everything feeds out of those systems for you to better understand the risk, the opportunities. And so what you're saying is it becomes now not just a function transaction hourly, how efficient can I get it? It becomes that relationship that you're on a journey and we're with you and we're going to come alongside, and a percentage just in your mindset, just allocate this percentage because your ROI on that, will definitely be shown, but it's just changing the mindset of this mandatory compliance. I got to do it. It's not really this is strategic in helping my business on this journey that I'm going on. And that's eye opening to a lot of people.
Yeah, I definitely would love to give credit to one of my mentors back in the day. He's no longer with us, but George Hilgis was one of the founders of Gifford Hilgis and Ingerson at the tax firm that I went to, or the CPA firm that I went to after my stint at Earthlink. And he opened my eyes because he was a great tax advisor. And we went on a client meeting. I got to ride in the car with him, and he was just giving me those nuggets and that wisdom. And he was talking about his impact on businesses when they have business life cycle events. He walked me through that. He had a client that had had a business for 15 years and they were about to sell it, but they'd already done the planning for 3 years about the exit. And he said that he was thinking in the middle of the night and woke up with a brilliant idea of how to save him more than $1 million on the tax structure. And he said, do you think I'm only going to charge him the 15 minutes that it took for me to sit and think about that and how to do it? Or do you think that he would pay whatever it is I charge him for it? And I was like, well, he can either do it with you and save all that money, or he wouldn't even know about it and not. So the value there to businesses is not the 15 minutes that we would normally charge them. The real value is our expertise and our knowledge. That stuck with me forever. And with every implementation that we go through, when I think about an optimized chart of accounts because I've specialized in it for 20 years, I think, oh yeah, why wouldn't they pay $10,000 for that to not have us do cleanup and not have a structured set of books that they could use in the future? It's not about just today, but we've got to be able to tell that story about it's not just the function of a chart of accounts, it's what you can do with a properly structured chart of accounts for compliance, for forecasting, for all of those things. And that part is building the relationship with the client where they trust you. So we've got to start telling them the why, not just delivering financial statements or an insight. We have to have the discussions with them. That's where the real value is about, oh, well, when I think back on the 10 others like you that I've dealt with before, here's the major things that I saw to look out for. That's huge. And sometimes that can happen in a 15-minute conversation.
Wow. You know what? That is now shifting the profession from a gotta have transactional to this navigator, helping you get further faster. It's a little bit of, I want to say almost that, you can get the old paper map out and then you can kind of go down here. Oh, I took a left turn here wrong. You can do there and you'll get there eventually, or maybe not. You might run out of gas and get stuck on the side of the road, or would you rather have that GPS coming alongside you that it's monitoring, it's predicting, it's recommending courses to get you further faster? Yeah, that's some pretty impactful stuff. Well, unfortunately, man, I know that we could do a 10-hour series and all this, but I gotta wrap this up. I get so excited talking to people, um, so to wrap things up, what I always ask people to do is this: Hey, looking back in your career, and if all of a sudden we invented a time machine, and the now experienced wise of the world Dixie could go back in time and maybe even catch you on your class, on your way walking to classes at Auburn. Go, hey, I'm going to give you some pieces of advice that's going to help you get further faster and not have to learn some lessons the hard way. What advice would you give yourself that you learned the hard way that you could have got there faster if you had a little bit of advice and wisdom?
Yeah, I think it's the shift of like 100% accuracy mindset, of that fearfulness if I can't say anything if it's not 100% accurate. So that know-it-allness where I would work long nights trying to make sure that I knew everything and I could go and guide them. That approach of here's what all I think and the flooding of all of my brain to clients is what I would say that if I had learned to listen sooner in my career to what the most important things were for the clients versus what I thought were the most important things for them to run a business, it would be that I should have listened more and solutioned less while having those conversations with the clients. It's not that you can't solution after the fact, but the time that you have that's so critical with them to listen and then think about it and then come back with a solution. That's what I would say the number one thing probably would have gotten me further or easier or not as stressed or not as many late night hours because they really don't care about all the things that are in my head. They trust that part. They really want me to listen to them and make sure that I know where they're headed and what they're thinking next.
Oh man, I am telling you that is incredible wisdom. I know that if anybody takes anything from this conversation, that is a nugget that I'm sure a lot of people will take advantage of. So, well, hey, listen, thank you again. If we'll put Dixie's contact information in. So if you want to clearly, I know how her heart is. She's always wanting to help and serve. So, I know that she's always given a word of advice, always wanting to help. That's where her heart is. So, thank you again so much for being on Codified Wisdom. And, stay tuned for next week where we again continue to help people get further faster. And we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to Codified Wisdom with your host, Eric Eager. Want more? Subscribe and follow Codified Wisdom on YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. To learn more about Eric Eager and how 4Impact Data helps leaders get further, faster, visit 4impactdata.com.